Hi, welcome back, and another episode of Real Life with JazSaro.
Hello Chris, hi, and hello to you. Nice to see you again.
Can you tell me the deeper meaning of winter solstice?
Absolutely, Chris. Yes, the winter solstice has a very, very deep meaning for us because, it's that period where we are at the deepest level of darkness. Yeah? So it's when, it's the shortest day, winter solstice, it's the shortest day and the longest night. Now, we have this every year, but, we have periods in our life that are like that. And, if you think about the deeper symbolic meaning, okay, let's just sort of look at our yearly sort of symbolic meaning. The deeper meaning would be, that we kind of reflect back on the year that's gone. And not just that year, sometimes we have cycles that we go through of journeys, and these cycles can be more than 1 year. They can be periods of like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. They can be periods where something then at the winter solstice comes to an end, because winter solstice is about endings, beginnings. It's a rebirth period. Okay. Now, one of the things that also in a previous video I've talked about is the fact that when I was going through my deepest journey, my darkest, deepest journey, which I would like to say is almost, it was the dark night of the soul, which started 30 years ago. And I've been going through this journey for 3 decades. And that's why I was talking about the journeys, like they have these, cycles that we go through. And it comes back, so what goes around comes around, it comes back to that point.
Yes.
Yeah. And so also during the winter solstice, we have this 3-day period that I have mentioned before as well, where, everything comes to like a stillness. So from the 21st to the 24th, there is a period of stillness. And then there is that movement again and the stirring. Now, if we look at the life of Jesus, and I have mentioned my connections to do with the Christ energy and Jesus coming into my life and helping me with certain things, the winter solstice is also linked to Jesus, because that day of movement is the 25th.
Yes.
It's Christmas Day.
Yeah.
We all celebrate Christmas Day. Well, most people, we celebrate Christmas Day, don't we? And when I celebrate Christmas Day with my family, I always I don't know why, but I always think of the Last Supper. It reminds me of the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Because it was that 3-day period that Jesus was, in the tomb, wasn't he? And then he rose. And that was the rebirth. He rose, and then there was light again. Yeah? So, and isn't it interesting that Jesus always referred to himself as the Son of the Father?
And there's that meaning about rising again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Son of the Father.
And
so, it's so symbolic, it's so relevant that, this timing, this period that we experience every winter, and so then, like, we also go through periods in our life generally when it's not actually winter, but we go through periods in our life when we go through a change. So we start to experience. Now I can share with you obviously a personal experience, so what happens is, you're like in a summer period. Life is full, it's blooming, happy, just like we feel in the summer. And, it's like, well, nothing can go wrong because the sun's out, you're feeling happy, and so what's going on the outside is reflecting how you're feeling on the inside.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, your life takes a turn, and you enter into the autumn period. And in the autumn period when there is change, that's the time when the leaves start falling off the trees.
Yeah.
Okay, and by the time they hit the winter period, they are bare, and everything is like so bare,
It's almost like a kind of seasonal midlife crisis, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be just midlife, it can happen at any time. And because obviously, being a therapist, and I see clients and I listen to clients' stories, and I can see when my clients are going through their different seasonal periods and coming into their dark night of the soul. So what I'm trying to say here basically is that you go through a period of the dark night of the soul before you come out the other end, which is the solstice, which is the winter solstice.
Yeah.
So you come out the other end. So you go from the summer period in your life, and then you go through the autumn period where you can maybe I'm not saying it happens to everybody, but it happens to some people, and it happened to me. And I went through a period where everything was fine in my life, and then all of a sudden the turning of the wheel, everything, I began to lose everything in my life, just like the trees losing their leaves. I lost everything. Everything went out of my life. And just as the days become shorter and shorter through the autumn, coming into winter, the days start to get shorter and shorter. My life began to become like that in terms of, there was more darker days. There was more darkness and darker days that were beginning to come into my life. The light was going out day by day. The light was getting shorter and shorter. The light was getting to a point where it was becoming so dim, and then eventually the light went out. It was total darkness. There was no light, and it was just total darkness. And in this period of darkness, it was very difficult initially, very difficult. I met a lot of challenges. I went through a lot of obstacles. I went through a period of really hard times, very trying times. And I experienced the period of poverty again in my life, the same as what I was born into. So that happened, and my life felt like it was completely barren. There was nothing in my life. It was just completely barren. There was no people, there was no money, there was nothing basically. And in that darkness, I was challenged to, somehow work through those obstacles and challenges to try and find the light. And that's what I had to do.
Do you feel it was like almost like a test of character?
Absolutely, it was a test. It was, I really feel and believe that I was being tested by spirit, you know, for things that I'm doing now. So it was my challenges that I had to go through. You know, I went through extreme pain, extreme hardship, and I went through such a lot of depression, phobias like agoraphobia, claustrophobia. I went, you know, I could not go out of my house. I always wanted to just stay in bed. I felt lifeless, and you know, it was the real dark night of the soul. It really was. It was just darkness. That's all I could see every day. You know, day and night just felt like darkness. So it was a case of trying to find the light, and eventually, you know, they say that sometimes, you know, like, when the more work you've done on yourself, like there is a quote, isn't there, by Rumi, that the more, obviously, the mirror will become clearer. So the more work you've done on yourself, basically, the more you shine. Yeah. So that's what I had to do. So coming into the light was about working on myself. First of all, it was about completely breaking down off the ego, the false self, completely breaking down, and then reinventing myself into a new person. And by doing that, I was drawing in the light. You know, so when I was initially in that very dark period, the dark night, I used to do meditation every day, because that's all I could do. And in my meditation for a long time, I used to see a cave. The cave was obviously me, and my life, basically. And so for a very long time it was just this cave I was seeing all the time, and I was in this cave. And initially this cave was horrible. It was dirty, it was wet, it was damp, and it felt cold and isolating. And I remember for a very long time, every time I meditated, I would end up going to this cave, and I would, you know, go into a corner, and I would just sort of huddle up like this, you know, just and rock myself. And it was such an isolating and lonely experience that I was going through, that I didn't even want to open my eyes. It was that bad. Not even in the cave, not in real life, not even in the cave, but the cave was my real life, because the cave was just symbolic, you know, because when I opened my eyes I could see how alone I was, how isolated I was, and how awful this cave was, you know, cold and water dripping, and it looking so damp, and so yeah, and I just felt helpless, really felt helpless, and so that's all I could do. But then I realised, you know, that I just needed to do that until I had the energy to get up and maybe do a few things in the cave, you know, that made it look a little bit more inviting and homely and appealing. So what I did was, because when I used to meditate I used to put a candle on, and one of the things I started doing was seeing the candle in the centre of the cave, so that the candle was providing some form of light and some form of warmth and comfort. And it was from that then I kind of like developed more and more strength and energy to cope with and do things that I wanted to do. But you know, this period of darkness that I've been going through has been 30 years. That's a long time.
Yes.
And I've noticed just recently, in the past year actually, that I'm coming back home to myself, I suppose, but I'm beginning to see life again. I'm beginning to see things, and it's almost like now I'm seeing people, and it's like nothing has happened. It's like people that I knew before this 30-year period who had also gone out of my life, and I think that was spirit, you know, because when they give us tests,
oh yeah,
they make sure they give us the test. So spiritually, it was the way my life just went, you know, all these people just disappeared out of my life, and now suddenly everybody's coming back, and people are so pleased to see me, like, where have you been?
Yeah.
What have you been doing? They've got no idea what I've been going through.
wow. Sounds like coming out of a coma.
Absolutely, that's what it feels like. I really do feel like the last few years especially has been about coming out of a coma.
Yeah.
It really has, that's how it feels. It feels like, yeah, I was in this cave and it was like I was, yeah, absolutely in a coma.
So, in a way, that cave was almost like a metaphor of a chrysalis.
It was.
In a way.
Yeah,
and,
it was.
You know, and I know that word has a double meaning. But that's amazing. Would you say the winter solstice has effects on people's mood? To, you know, I know you've gone through a bad experience, hard time over the winter period, but would you say it affects other people's perspective of life over these times?
You know, a lot of people end up getting what they call this SAD syndrome, seasonal affective
I've
disorder.
heard of that, yeah. It's a real thing.
It is, yeah, seasonal affective disorder, because, and I've been, you know, obviously being a therapist and listening to people talking about their problems and issues and, you know, things that I've experienced and observed, and my own journey, and going into the depths, you know, of the subconscious and into the ether, the general universal ether. I feel that people sometimes find it very hard during the winter period because they don't know how to embrace it and work with it. And a lot of people are actually frightened to work through also their dark energies, the dark side of themselves, you know, whatever that dark side is.
Right.
So many people are really, really stuck in those dark energies and very frightened to even open the door.
So is it about realising this dark side and dealing with it and moving forward?
Absolutely. You have to realise the dark side. You have to become aware of it. You have to become conscious of it, so that you can work through it and transform it. Because unless you change it, things are not going to change.
Yeah, hard time. And a time in your life you'll never forget, you know, never forget that.
It's been a powerful time. I've learnt a lot. It's made me a lot stronger. It's been a really, really, really powerful time. So, you know, the message I have for people is actually to embrace the darkness, not to be afraid of it, and to work with it, because we do need both, actually. We need the light and the dark, they work together. And, you know, it is amazing that once you've done that journey, how you can come out the other end being such a different person, and the strength that it gives you, you know. So not to be afraid of the darkness, but work with it, embrace it, you know, because it is really powerful, a really good learning journey. You learn so much from the darkness. Because once the light's there, the light's there. It's the darkness that teaches us.
Yes.
It's the darkness that is our, you know, greatest teacher, and then the light comes up, you know.
And it reminds me of some earlier you saying about there's like a moment of silence.
Yes.
Where you have that reflection.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The stillness. Because if we don't, you know, like the saying, also in this period of darkness, you know, that emptying out, because if we, if our, you know, like if our cup is always full, how are we going to receive all the new goodness that we are meant to have?
Yeah.
If we don't, you know, empty out the cup of what we no longer need. And so, yeah, it is important. And there is a quote, I can't remember it off at the top of my head now, but Carl Jung also, there is a very famous quote by Carl Jung, something about making the darkness conscious. Yeah, I can't remember it now, but it's a very, very powerful quote.
So would you say, as a working therapist and your line of work, that you usually receive more cases or more work around this period as
During
well?
the winter?
Yeah, in the terms of people having that time to reflect on.
People round about the winter time do report more in terms of depression and feelings of depression. Yeah.
But is that going back to what we was talking about earlier about sad?
The seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's linked into it very much so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's because, you know, people don't stop during the winter. That people just carry on as if it's the summer period. You know, we have the seasons, we have the elements, you know, and winter period is about inner reflection. It's about turning inward. And winter solstice, that 3-day period that's very significant, is all about turning inwards.
Yes.
You know, it's really interesting that during the winter solstice I see people advertising social gatherings and partying, and that's defeating what the winter solstice is all about, really, because the winter solstice period is about you turning inward and reflecting on your inner journey, your inner life. And the best way to do that is to be alone, to be by yourself, you know. So yes, you can go to a meditation group, but parties and social gatherings, they would not allow you to do the real work. And it's not just the winter solstice, the whole of the winter period is very much about us reflecting, you know, for the new beginnings that are going to come in the springtime. But people seem to sort of just carry on and fight the energies, battle with the energies, and then wonder what's going on.
Yeah. So this might be their catalyst, really, for them to change.
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing what kind of came into my mind, say before like all the major religions and the understanding we have about things, say before that, was there always a time during winter where it was just family time and reflection time. I know there's a lot of winter festivals and that we adhered to, but before these festivals, was it always known as a family time?
Well, if we go back to the very first kind of people that practiced shamanic kind of practices before all the religions came along, yes, they had rituals. They had rituals where they embraced, they did ceremonial work, where they embraced that, time of winter solstice, the drumming, having fires, and so that's where it comes from originally, anyway.
Right.
So in those days you would expect, yes, the families to be together and communities to be together, doing these rituals and ceremonies that embraced the seasons, the elements, and the solstices. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's been brilliant. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you again for watching our channel. And again, if you have any questions, queries, you would like to know more about, we could always do a video on a particular topic or theme or something that you thought about as a result of these videos. Just please let us know, and thank you for watching.
Thank you. Please subscribe.